I want to begin with a haunting image. Sunday morning, haunting image. Eli Sharabi, chained, starved, brutalized in a Hamas tunnel for 491 days, emerging at last a walking ghost, clutching a certificate of release, like a degree. His wife, daughters, and brother are already dead. His testimony delivered last week at the United Nations Security Council, delivered on Friday at the United Nations Security Council, was not just therefore a personal appeal, it was a scathing indictment of a collective failure. The failure of the United Nations, the Red Cross, and tragically, of Israel's own leadership. And Sharabi asked the most human question imaginable: where was the world? Let's be blunt. The obsessive war pursued by Benjamin Netanyahu has done little to bring back the hostages, to restore peace, or to dislodge Hamas from power. Those were his objectives. What it has done, however, is to entrench a policy of collective punishment, suffocate international humanitarian efforts, and reduce institutions like the UN and the ICRC to helpless observers. The war, once perhaps a righteous response to a terrorist atrocity, let's not forget that, has transformed. A metastasis has taken place into a grotesque theatre of personal survival. That survival is Netanyahu's survival. A war no longer about justice, but about political continuity. And this isn't conjecture at all. The former hostage negotiator, Gershon Baskin, said it plainly: Netanyahu never intended to enter phase 2 of the ceasefire deal, because peace threatens his coalition. It doesn't threaten Hamas, it threatens Netanyahu. Let's recall the earlier ceasefire. 33 hostages were returned. Progress, tangible and human, but Netanyahu sabotaged the next phase, resuming full military assault just hours before the next batch of hostages were due to be freed. Why? Because a ceasefire empowers moderates, exposes the IDF's lack of endgame strategy, and most threatening of all, leaves Netanyahu politically isolated. Meanwhile, over 400 Palestinians, many of whom women and children, were killed in a single night as Israel broke that ceasefire. These deaths, these lives, are not incidental. They're the currency of Netanyahu's political arithmetic. And what of the UN and the Red Cross? Hamstrung. Aid cannot be delivered when war planes fly overhead. Hostages cannot be visited when tunnels are bombed indiscriminately. Neutrality is impossible in a war that demands sides, not principles. Sharabi's harrowing witness revealed that Hamas stole humanitarian aid, UN boxes repurposed to feed terrorists. This theft is not just a war crime, it's a strategic PR catastrophe, because it allows Netanyahu's government to justify blockades that punish 2 million civilians while simultaneously excusing its own obstruction of Red Cross access to over 9,500 Palestinian prisoners. This is not security, it's vengeance masquerading as governance. Even America's veto at the Security Council in defense of hostage release became hollow when the war's escalation jeopardized those very lives. Netanyahu, bolstered by Trumpian delusions of a Middle East Riviera built atop the rubble of Gaza, ignored not only the Arab peace proposal but also common decency. The offer: Gulf-funded reconstruction, Hamas displacement, peacekeepers, was more than a good deal. It was a way out. But it threatened the fantasy of Greater Israel, so it was ignored. Let's not pretend this war is achieving its objectives. It isn't. Hamas remains operational, its ranks replenished, its tunnels rebuilt, its grip on Gaza unbroken, and the hostages still underground, still unseen. What has been achieved is domestic political consolidation, the reintegration of far-right ideologues, the subjugation of the judiciary, the dismissal of dissenters like Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar, and threats against the Attorney General. Power has been preserved, not peace. Eli Sharabi said it best: "I'm not a diplomat, I'm a survivor." He begged the world to act, but Netanyahu is too busy ensuring that those who might negotiate peace, those who might return the hostages, are excluded. This isn't war, It's a political strategy. It's not about security, it's about optics. And the cost? Thousands of Palestinian civilians, dozens of Israeli hostages, and the moral authority of global institutions too afraid or too divided to intervene meaningfully. I repeat again, this is not about security, and it's not about the survival of Israel. This is about the survival of one man, Netanyahu. This is about the security of one man, Netanyahu. So I begin where I end. The failure is collective, but the obsession is Netanyahu's. This war, this brutality, this grotesque endurance of horror is not just a humanitarian disaster, it's a moral collapse, and there's one man responsible. And this isn't to excuse Hamas in any way. I point the finger of blame at Hamas. But it's Netanyahu who has pursued single-handedly this belligerent obsession without success. The hostages are not bargaining chips. Gaza is not a backdrop for coalition theatre, and humanity is not Netanyahu's to discard. And the problem is now Netanyahu is empowered by the blackguard who sits behind the resolute desk and wears an orange wig. And that makes his resolve even more determined. We need to bring them home. We need to bring the hostages home. We need to stop the war. We need to restore peace. Now,